Nontsasa, we're committed to pay before 31 May 2017, both BPTH and the second third of the deposit. However, I cannot say how the group cash position would be at that time. By end May 2017, we would have paid, I think he's wanting to say what we would have paid would be 67% of the deposit, not 75% as requested. Considering our cash situation, this is the best we can do. I hope they will understand. And then that is then followed up at 3181.
3182.
3182, yes. Would you like to... oh yes, because you then forward it to Mr. Price, and that's an AAR person, is that right? And you say, "Dear Nick, below is the response from our CFO, please consider." Mr. Price comes back above that page again, still on the 4th of May, and thanks you for coordinating this, and the payment up to 67% of the deposit plus the PBH invoice is agreed. The only final ask from me is relating to when the payment is made. The end of May is our financial year end. It must be received in time for that. Could you ask for the payments to be made by the 21st of May so that we're assured the funds will be received before the end of the month? Many thanks for your continued support and progress of this issue. And then at 3181, at the bottom of that page, Ms. Memela, you write to Mr. Area again. "Hi Dev, their last request is the date of payment. Do you think we can adhere to this date?" And then Mr. Area responds on the 5th of May to yourself and says, "Hi," well, it's to yourself, but also to Ms. Mosese, and he says, "Hi Makotso, please find out from SART Treasury how many days it takes for the funds to reach..." Apologies, Chair.
I've lost you or you have lost me.
No, it's because I'm going so fast.
The problem is that with this email, sometimes you have got to go
back
forward, sometimes you have to go back.
Chair, and you know, as I was doing it, I was realizing it was too fast, but it's my effort to move swiftly today.
Okay.
Chair, we are now at 3181.
Oh, okay.
That's where I might have lost you.
Well, I was still at 3182.
Yes, indeed. So let's just recap because I was going too fast. At 3182, Ms. Memela has forwarded the response from Mr. Area to the AAR representative, because now the issue is when are they going to be able to get the payment through, and the AAR representative thanks Ms. Memela for forwarding it, and they explain why they need the payment early because of their financial year end. And then at page 3181, Ms. Memela sends an email to Mr. Area, Ms. Mosese, and Ms. Mtembu, and says, "Hi Dev, their last request," this is at the bottom of the page, Chair, "their last request is the date of payment. Do you think we can adhere to this date?" And above that is Mr. Area's response on the 5th of May 2017 to Ms. Memela and Ms. Mosese. He says, "Hi Mahotso, please find out from SAA Treasury how many days it takes for funds to reach AAR's bank account after we effect the EFT. Considering our cash position, I would like to pay as late as possible so that they can get the money by the 30th. Ms. Memela, do you recall being involved in that chain of correspondence at the time?
I recall.
And do you accept that at the time that SART was required to make this payment, it had an impact on the cash position of SART?
Do I understand that it had an impact?
Do you accept that it did?
I promised yesterday.
Please keep to your promise.
Yes.
You say yes, I accept, or no, I don't accept.
No, I do not accept. And yes.
Okay.
And why is that?
Okay.
Remember,
the question yesterday was about the guarantee, right? That what was my understanding if like we were to give the guarantee versus the cash, right? And I said, because I don't have a financial background, but the understanding of a guarantee is that even if SART were to give a guarantee, that's my understanding now, is that there should be money that is put there by SART regardless. So there is no difference anyway. in terms of like the cash, giving cash to AAR and then SAD having cash at the bank and sending the guarantee, that cash still belongs to SAD. So that's my understanding, regardless of the fact that I did say that I don't have the financial background. This is something that should be answered by a finance person.
But he just wanted your own understanding.
For me, it does not make any difference, Chair.
Do you understand how the drawdown was going to work if all that had been provided was a guarantee?
Do I understand if what the
drawdown would have worked?
I don't.
Let me explain it from the provisions of clause 4.26 of the contract. You'll recall that when we looked at it yesterday, I understand we need to go to clause 4.26.
Yes, okay.
It's the same file?
No, it's in DD 22 F.
I don't propose to go there, but when you read it,
I will.
I'm
fine.
So
yes.
You're happy. Oh, good.
It's just that, like, I mean, the clauses. But if she wants to go there, she can. I'm okay with that.
Certainly. So all I'm going to do is paraphrase the clause, but if anyone wants to be looking at it at the same time, it's in DD 22F at page 2325. So what that clause provided for was payment of the deposit by way of an irrevocable standby letter of credit from the bank. And what the clause went on to say was, that must be given to JM and AAR, and as and when there are any late payments by SART under the agreement, then what AAR is entitled to do is draw down off the strength of the letter of standby credit from the bank that amount to make up the late payment. And it's followed up because there's an obligation on the part of SART to make good any drawdown which is then taken from the basis of the standby letter of credit from the bank. And that's the reason why I say there's a completely different situation from a cash flow perspective for SART when it has to pay over 3 months in 2017 $4.1 million US, which we were told at the time by Mr. Newman was around 60 million rand, as compared with a letter of credit sitting only able to be accessed by JM and AAR in the event of late payment.
So, Chair, I don't know if I understand Ms. Hofmeyer properly. I think she was explaining to me so that I understand. The letter of credit will just sit there with no money sitting at the bank?
No, she's not saying that. She says if there is a letter of credit,
it gives assurance.
But she says the way it's going to work is that AAR won't have access to that unless there is a late payment.
Yes.
If there is no late payment,
it will sit there.
Okay. Whereas if you give them cash, you have given them cash before there is any need.
Okay, I guess.
Ms. Hofmeyer?
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, Chair, I'm indebted.
Right.
Thank you, Chair.
Given that contrast, do you accept then that it is more onerous on SART to have to pay over in 3 tranches in 2017 60 million rand than a situation in which AAR only has access to that money in the event of late payment by SART of invoices?
Chair, I will put it this way. It was not onerous to SART to pay that amount because remember, failure to pay that amount would bear consequences to SART. SART, their function is to service aircraft, and servicing aircraft, like, you use the spares that is supposed to be provided by AAR. And like SART not paying that amount of money, AAR like had that entitlement to keep or not give us like the component so that we can work on the aircraft, and that causes an aircraft on the ground. Which department that gets blamed if the aircraft is on the ground is procurement. They will always say, Nontsasa, because she's not a technician, she does not understand these things. We don't understand why she's sitting at procurement anyway. And you could start there from the failure to pay. So that's why you see when she's reading all these emails, I understand like she's trying to make everybody understand. But like, I mean, another person would interpret it as Nontsasa was pushing so hard for AAR to pay, only to find that I was pushing for their company so that they get the component. Because AAR made it very clear from the day one that it is their policy as well to get the deposit. So we had to ensure that like, we get the component on time, because remember, this was a big contract. One supplier, international supplier, comes in, the other one is going out. Bitterly so, because like, I mean, they've also lost the case in court. And there will be lots of sabotage there, and then the aircraft will be on the ground. But like, nobody's going to check if like, I mean, finance has paid, not paid. Everybody's going to look at procurement, because procurement is the one that purchases all these components. Yes, so I'm talking about those kind of, I understand what Ms. Hofmeyer is trying to understand, but in terms from the finance point of view, but like the consequences that the company would face are unmatched.
Okay. Ms. Mbangwa, you have your hand up. I just want to say that today you will have to have very good reasons for objections. I want us to get going.
Chair, I will not be long. I had already explained my objections yesterday, but I repeat, this question is unfair to be put to this witness. And secondly, Ms. Hofmeyer does not have the knowledge to phrase this question, and I will explain just now why. She says, do you understand?
How do you know what Ms. Hofmeyer, what knowledge Ms. Hofmeyer has and what knowledge she doesn't have?
Yes, Chair. I just want to explain myself. If I've used the wrong language, let me say, she is not in a position to know how the drawdown works.
How do you know that, Ms. Mbandwa?
I want to give Chair, if Chair can just give me time. This is a financial arrangement. It is common cause in this hearing that Ms. Memela is supply chain. There is a person at SAAT who is the chief financial officer or who is at finance. Then it is that person who can come if it is necessary.
No, Ms. Mbandwa, no. Ms. Hofmeyer is asking Ms. Memela to give her own understanding. She doesn't have to be an expert. She doesn't need to be a financial person to give her own understanding. She's not being asked to give expert evidence. She can say, as far as I know, this is what happens, or my understanding is the following. It might be correct, it might not be correct, but it is my understanding.
The danger, Chair, of putting a technical question to a person who does not have expert knowledge of that technical.
She will say, I don't know.
But she has been saying,
and then we'll move on.
But Chairperson, she has been saying, I do not have the financial.
She has been giving her understanding.
And my other concern, Chairperson, which I have, I don't want to stress,
yes.
I've raised my concerns.
Yeah.
Why I think Ms. Hofmeyer is not the person to ask this question. The other second thing is, if a person is asked a question, a person should be asked a question which is within her knowledge. This question.
But if it's not, she will say, I don't know, and that's acceptable.
As it pleases, Chair.
Okay, let's get going.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Memela, you've given your evidence already on whether you regarded the payment of the 60 million as having a negative impact on the cash position of SART. What I'd like to now move to is who stood to benefit from the payment of the 60 million rand in cash. Because what I would like to put to you for your comment is the following. You see, if SART pays 60 million in the middle of 2017 to AAR, you'll recall that the arrangement between AAR and JM Aviation is that JM Aviation is entitled to 5% of all revenue derived under the contract. Do you recall that?
Yes, but that's, I mean, I don't understand how.
Yes, should be.
I remember that, but
yeah. But
yes.
wait for the next question.
All right.
Yeah. Yes is,
so that
is a good enough answer.
Thank you, Chair. That means that when SART paid over the total of 60 million rand.
For the deposit.
For the deposit,
okay.
Indeed. It was revenue generated pursuant to the contract for AAR, and in terms of the JV agreement between AAR and JM Aviation has an entitlement to 5% of that payment, the consequence of which was that it was entitled to receive 3 million rand. That situation does not arise if there is a standby letter of credit from the bank that can only be drawn down in the event of non-payment. Do you have a comment on that?
I do, Chair.
Yes.
And I won't take long, but my understanding of the deposit, security deposit, is that as much as, like, I mean, it would have been paid cash and stuff, but it still belongs to SART, right? It's just that it's paid over to guard against any other, maybe failure to deliver from the SART side. So for me, that cannot be defined as a revenue. I'll make an example of like the rental a process where, like, I mean, the tenant pays the deposit, and then you have to keep the deposit in the interest-bearing account, so that, like, I mean, if there is nothing that happened with it during this contract, you are able to pay back the amount. So I don't see that as the revenue. That's my understanding.
Did you make inquiries from AAR that that's how they were treating the 4.1 million US dollars?
Chair,
the answer will be yes, I did, or no, I did not.
No, Chair, because I promised that I'll be crisp. No.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Memela, then I'd just like to move to your particular role in this contract and preceding procurement process, because you've emphasized your role in supplier development.
Hang on a second. Ms. Memela, do you need a few minutes?
No, Jam.
Are you okay? No, if you do need time to take medication or anything, just let me know.
I'm okay.
All right.
I didn't think you would notice.
I did notice. I am watching. Okay, all right.
I was moving, Ms. Memela, to your particular focus on supplier development in relation to this tender. And you actually highlighted for us the other day that it was a critical criteria of this bid that the bidders commit to supplier development. Do you recall taking us to that?
It was one of the elements of the tender, Chair. There's a difference between the critical criteria, and I took this commission through the elements, and I said, here are the critical criteria: phase 1, phase 2 is BEE and price, phase 3 is reciprocal supply development, and I did even explain that, okay, it valued 10% each, 10% each.
Yes, so supplier development was a critical criteria, correct?
She just wants to confirm that you agree that you said
no.
That's a critical...
okay, I've just explained again.
Well, I must say that after you explained, I wasn't sure either.
You were not clear as well.
Yeah. But okay. If you say, yes, it was a critical requirement, that will be, if it was, or no, it wasn't.
No, Chair. There was a critical criteria. It was under phase 1, right?
Okay, what was under phase 1?
Phase 1 will be the capability of each bidder. They will be able to provide, like, the type of parts that SART is looking for, and all these technical things, like,
hang on.
And all that.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Just say to Ms. Hofmeyer, yes, it was a critical requirement, or no, it was not a critical requirement.
Okay, it was not a critical criteria. It was part of the elements of the tender.
Okay, let's... I really didn't anticipate a debate on this, but let's go to the page of the critical criteria in the RFB. It's at DD22.
DD22?
E? Yes, at page 2062.
Page, sorry?
2062.
2062.
Do you see that there's a
Yes.
block on that page that says Phase 1 critical criteria?
Yes.
Do you see that it includes supplier development?
Yes, I see.
So was your answer just now incorrect?
Yeah. Okay.
You,
I see also
you
the-
accept it was.
Yeah, it was incorrect.
Yeah.
Right. Let's look at what the critical criteria said about supplier development. Chair, this is about the fourth line from the bottom within that table.
Okay.
You'll see a line that says supplier development,
Yes.
and then there's an asterisk, and it says it must equal to 10% of the contract value.
Yeah.
And then in brackets it says include proposal.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I see that.
If you go then just over 2 pages to the definitions, because remember there was an asterisk that said we must look at the definitions, you'll find the definition at page 2064. Do you see that?
I see that.
Ms. Memela, just before we look at the definition of supplier development, you have emphasized throughout your evidence that you had a particular focus on supplier development in this tender. What I'm interested in knowing is when you received the CFST recommendation, you indicate in your evidence you'd reviewed it. Did you take particular, or did you pay particular attention to the supplier development aspects of the bids when you signed off?
When I sign off. Chair, when the recommendation through a submission is delivered to me for me to look at,
From
as I said, from the
CFST.
CFST,
Yeah.
it's what a brief summary of what the process that they've gone through, evaluating and adjudicating and whatever. In the adjudication or like CFST team, there is a senior manager supplier development who is responsible for running that part in there when they are doing the evaluation and stuff. As I have said, that also like from the legal and contracts management point of view, there's also Ms. Okimpig who is responsible for that part. So of course, like when they vote, they are voting now overall scoring. Like on the elements that they have rated when they were voting. So it's not like I don't remember the submission, but like it's not like they just write about supply development on its own, and then I have to.
Is your answer that you don't remember whether you paid
I don't remember.
attention?
I don't remember, but like remember, Chair, as I had said to you when you ask about the submission, I pay attention to everything to ensure that it's flowing and everything that needs to be there before it gets to the board is in there.
Okay, so you don't remember whether you paid particular attention to it?
I don't remember whether I paid a particular attention to it.
Okay.
Yes, but I remember that they had put that, okay, the what do you call, the JV partner for Air France was Kwane Capital.
Yes, Ms. Hoffman.
And were you aware that it was a critical criteria of the bill, of the bid, apologies, that a proposal on supplier development had to be provided with the bid?
Yes.
And if we go then to the definition of supplier development, I just want us to look at what it says that proposal ought to have included.
Okay.
You'll find that at page 2064 in the same bundle. You'll see at the bottom of that page there's a block headed supplier development, must form 10% of the contract value, and it must entail the following. There's an introduction in that paragraph.
Can I read it?
Certainly. Why don't you read
Yes.
the
Can I
full
read it?
paragraph?
Yeah, read it.
Okay. SAT has embarked on a supplier development program with a list of nominated suppliers being approved by the SAT board to promote the development of our local economy. SAT considers any mentorship, partnerships, skills transfers, knowledge transfers, assistance in developing a local company to become sustainable in an area that a local company currently does not have capability. SMME, job creation, training and development, and or any sustainable economic growth through revenues accumulated over the fulfillment period to be possible initiatives that are considered as supplier development. Other initiatives include research and development and or technology transfer. As a result, bidders are requested to supply a proposal on how and what they would impart in terms of skills, training, technical information, etc., to a local South African vendor. Bidder to indicate what value they would place on each area of development based on the above, which they will be imparting to the local vendor.
Thank you. Ms. Memela, do you know then why, after AAR and JM Aviation were awarded the bid, you'll recall the board made the decision on the 9th of May, and I think the letter communicating to them that they were successful went on about the 13th of May. I think you authored that letter. Why was AAR and JM Aviation allowed to submit their supplier development proposal after that date, on the 1st of July 2016?
Chair, there is no, for instance, time frame in terms of submitting the proposal, as long as it's going to be adhered by both parties within the time frame. But let me first address this. Remember, the CFST initially awarded Air France, and even on Air France, I don't know if Ms. Hofmeyer was going to ask me about Air France, but even Air France had not submitted that proposal. So they were also going to be given a chance to submit that proposal, because remember, the proposal should be submitted after both parties maybe visit each other, go and check what is in there, because remember, they're talking about skills development, technology transfer, and know-how. That's when they will find out that, okay, maybe this local company needs training on this, and they need support from us from this side. So that's when they will be able to putting together that proposal, and then they will sign it and say, okay, this is what we are putting down, that we're going to be doing for this local supplier.
Yeah. But you say there is no time frame, specified time frame within which such a proposal was required to be submitted.
Yes, my understanding, as much as I don't sit there, Ms. Hofmeyer read here saying supply development must equal to 10% of the contract value, and then it says include a proposal. Right?
Yes.
So there is, in that bracket, there is nothing that says, okay, make sure that you include a proposal within the tender period.
Yes.
And I can tell you now, if they do that...
I think you have given the answer. Let's see what Ms. Hofmeyer has to say. You said there is no time frame within which they were required to do so. Okay.
Ms. Memela, this is the request for bid document, is it not, that we're looking at?
This is the request for bid document that is used by the CFST, yes.
Yes, and on this page, we are being told, this is 2062, what the evaluation criteria are of the bid. And under critical criteria, bidders are told, if we look at this block, that they have a requirement for supplier development, which must equal 10% of the contract value and include proposal. How could that not mean that they must include their proposal when they bid?
Chair, okay, again, I will be just putting my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. What Ms. Hofmeyer is doing is questioning your answer. You say there was no time frame within which they were required to put in a proposal. So she is saying, but this was part of the request for bids, and therefore it must be that information is supposed to be there when the bid is put in. That's what she is suggesting. And what is your answer to that?
What is my answer to that? Okay, Chair. My understanding, as much as this is the knowledge of the CFST, my understanding is that the bidders, maybe they were given an opportunity to give commitment. I'm not sure if there was that commitment from Air France, from AR. I do know that there was no such commitment from Lufthansa. But if they give commitment, at least the proposal will be worked on based on the commitment that they've made, that we commit to the supplier development, that this is what we're going to work on. Once they understand, because it's just that we are running out of time, and you've asked me to give crisp. This is broader than how it looks. I will give you the example, for instance, that we once asked Air France and Israel Aerospace to give us what is it that they can give back to the country and stuff, and then they just gave us a 3-page promising this and that and that. And when you sit back and look at it, because they don't know, they don't have a background about South Africa or any of these local suppliers, what is their need and stuff. They just came up with that from their head because they have not sat down. So it's not a good idea to do the proposal at that stage because you have not sat with these people now after the agreement has been done. So that is my understanding.
Ms. Hoffman.
How do you choose between the bidders then on supplier development if they don't include in their bid precisely what they're going to do for supplier development and what value they're going to ensure gets translated to the beneficiaries of that development?
But like, I mean, the 10%, if they say, Chair, they are committing to give 10% towards supply development, they're giving 10% towards a reciprocal work, already they've committed. They're all now, after that, like to put on the proposal, is to just list down, break down what is it that is going to be done, specifically.
But assume all of the bidders said, yes, I'll commit 10%. How do you choose between them if they haven't been required with their bid to submit their proposal, bearing in mind those important elements that you read out? You need to explain what benefit is going to be translated and what value will be received.
Chair, remember, the evaluation, my understanding, they are not evaluating based on the list of what the suppliers have promised and listed down that, okay, I'm going to build school in that rural area, I'm going to build toilets and hospitals. It's not about that. It's about committing, and then like once we know exactly what is the need of the local suppliers, because remember, we are managing these suppliers, we'll be able to say, okay, this is what is needed from you. You understand? So like it works like that. So it's not like, I mean, when Ms. Kate says, you can see even the comply, it says yes or no, right? Did you see that form that she took us to? It says yes or no. So like once they commit to that, it's up to the company now to say, okay, this is what you've committed on, here is the local supplier, let's discuss. And then like they put down the proposal and like go all over.
What I would have expected, and I suspect it might be the same expectation that Ms. Hofmeyer would have in the context of tenders, is that when the request for bids says supply development is a critical requirement and says what is written here, it should be 10% of the value of the contract and so on. I would have expected that what is being required is that if you want to bid for this tender, one of the things that must be dealt with in your proposal is, in your bid, is the supplier development. And that one of the things that you will be competing with other bidders on is how good is what you are putting on the table in terms of supplier development. So if if what you say on supplier development is vague and so on, and somebody else has got a very clear picture of what they are going to do, you stand a better chance of getting more points than the other one who has got just vague statements as to how they will contribute. That's what I would expect. What do you say?
Let's say now, sitting around the table, the people that are doing the busy with the CFST, the evaluation, the adjudication, they are sitting there. Let's say now it's possible what you think might have happened. That like there are here the proposals made by these multinational companies that okay, we're going to do this for the supplier that we came with, and we're going to do that and that and that. How, without the local supplier sitting at that table, will those people internal at SAT know that indeed what is written there in that proposal is something that is needed by this supplier?
But you see, that the bidder needs to address exactly that. When the bidder needs to say, the people who will adjudicate this bid, what will they be needing in order for me to give me maximum points? they will be needing to know whether I already have a local supplier that I will work with. They will need to know whether I've had discussions with this local supplier about what this local supplier needs. And I have evaluated their suggestions of where I can help, and I have made up my mind that this is where I will help. So when I put in my bid, I am clear about that, and if necessary, I attach a letter from the local supplier that says, indeed, these are the things that we need desperately.
Sure.
So you make your bid as a bidder full and complete on this issue.
Chair, it's about committing to the supplier. I can, you see the elements that are listed there as critical criteria. I'll just make an example now of one of them. Being, it says the supplier must be a 24-hour, 365 days of service. So now what is expected there by Ms. Hofmeyer from the supplier development? Imagine if she was to ask, okay, did you make sure that the supplier delivered within 24 hours exactly? I mean, that is managed by a certain person to ensure that, delivery is on time. You understand? So, there is somebody who's responsible for managing that supplier development to push and ensure that these suppliers are doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing. Chair, let me give an example of the NIP obligation before the supplier development, which is now will be controlled by SAD. The NIP obligation, these multinational companies were expected to pay 30% of the value of the contract, right, back to DTI. And if that was the case also for supplier development, for NIP obligation, that was done afterwards. Once the multinational company wins, then we'll write a letter to DTI and say, okay, Bridgestone, Air France, or whoever have won this tender, take over. Now what they do, the first thing that they do, they enter into an MOU that does not really state what the 30% will be used to do, because like DTI, through these multinational companies, they have to go through a research and check within the country that 30%, what can it be used to develop maybe certain communities and stuff. So these are the things that are done afterwards, after the tender has been done.
Is my understanding correct that your evidence is therefore to the effect that at the time when the proposal is, the bid is put in, there is not much information you as such were expecting the bidders to put in under supplier development? All you needed is a commitment that they will, what would be the commitment you would need? What would you say?
For instance, you see,
it would be a commitment that says what?
You see, Chair, there's...
Is it a commitment to put aside 10% of the value to supply development generally, or is it much more detailed than that?
Since I'm saying I don't sit in the CFST, it might be, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a letter. Maybe Ms. Hofmeyer can share with us, since she's asking more about AR that eventually won, if there was a proposal from Air France.
But you see, I'll let Ms. Hofmeyer continue now. You see, my understanding would be that you need to put in your bid how good your proposal is on how you will contribute to supply development. You might say to me, maybe that's the impression what is written here gives, but at a practical level, we at SAD accepted proposals or bids that didn't have much, as long as it was clear that the company or the bidder was committing to contributing the 10% required. That would be enough at the stage of putting in the bid. The rest would be discussed when they've won.
Well, Chair, for me, from where I'm sitting,
yes,
the people that sit around that table, CFST members, most of them, as you have seen, some of the affidavit, are technicians that have been working at SAD for over 35 years without ensuring or maybe pushing these multinational suppliers to give back to this country. So you see, that's where my uncomfort comes from. That, like, I mean, we would expect the CFST members that have been sitting at SAT for 35 years, like with NIP obligation applicable already at that time, not doing anything to make sure that these people are giving back to the country. We have a country like China, Dubai, those people don't compromise. When they give you a contract, you must give back to their country. So like the NIP obligation papers and supply development is for that. So like now those people that are sitting there, they didn't even understand what supply development is about. They didn't even understand what NIP obligation, in fact, they were against it completely. So for us to expect them to be the one who decide and evaluate in detail what is a proposal, of course, any multinational suppliers, because they've been working with them for long, and like they will just put whatever that makes everybody happy at in that table.
So is my understanding correct that what you are saying is that the way that SAT applied this, or the CFST applied this, was that they would only discuss with the bidder after the bidder has won?
After they've committed, and then like the bidder has won, then like then there will be an involvement of this local supplier. At least they will be able to give them information. Here is our need, here is the gap. These people, like this 10%, they can give it to transfer of skills. We need the computers for us to be able to help them transfer, supply
would that be
parts
done
and stuff.
Before the actual contract is signed, or would it be done after the contract has been signed?
It will be done after the contract is done. No, like it could be done before the contract is signed. Because remember, the award, for instance, maybe it will be made, it will be signed May, and then the contract commences in October. So somehow, if it happens, the contract, like it could be done before the contract gets signed. But at the end of the day, even if it's not done there, like there should be maybe valid reasons why it was not finalized by then.
Okay, all right. Well, I can tell you, but Ms. Hofmeyer may have questions. I can tell you, it seems to me much more sensible to say, put your proposal and deal with supply development fully. But I understand.
Maybe then I may sound like I'm defending the CFST, but I'm saying.
No, you are saying what you understood to be happening and why it was happening.
Okay. Yes. No, but I just wanted to add that, like, remember that this was a new program at SAT, like unlike the likes of Transnet, because we're following their lead. Also, unlike the likes of ESCOM that have already started doing this, like already had certain frameworks in place and stuff. For SAT, it was a teething phase.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Ms. Hoffman?
So, Ms. Memela, just to clarify, is it your evidence that the CFST team did not evaluate the different proposals on supplier development that had been provided by the bidders?
No, I didn't say that. I said, like, I'm sure they evaluated their commitment, and the fact that this form says yes or no. If they say yes, then like they will evaluate that based on yes. Like, as you see that also on the operational or technical ones where it says BER rate 70%, they will say yes. Remember also the BER, it's something that like you have to go down and give it a breakdown. It's for everybody to understand. But as long as they say yes, you keep them to that commitment.
So the issue is whether they've said yes.
Yes.
And then
I'm not sure.
the proposal happens afterwards.
Remember, Ms. Hoffman, I don't sit there. So like I'm not sure. Maybe that's why I was saying maybe in your files you may have like some letters for Air France or for other bidders. Like since like now you're asking about AR and JM. But like, I mean, remember the initial bidder that was awarded was by the CFST and supply chain and management was Air France. So you see, Chair, like I would understand if this question was coming, okay, Ms. Memela, Air France had put this proposal.
Well,
and stuff, and then like now here is AR.
I'm going to stop you, Ms. Memela. I'm going to stop you. You see, you may not have sat in CFST meetings, but you were the head of procurement, and therefore one would expect that you would know how procurement processes were dealt with, and one would expect that you would know, for example, what this kind of requirement, how it was applied or how it was adjudicated, because as head of procurement, you would be expected, I would imagine, to guide quite a lot of people within SAT to say on procurement issues, this is what we require as SAT, and these are our policies, this is legislation. If there is this requirement, which is said to be critical, one would expect that you would know how it is supposed to be dealt with, so that if, for example, CFST didn't deal with it the way it should be dealt with, I would expect that you would be the person to say, you people are not acting in compliance with this requirement the way you deal with your work.
Okay.
That's my expectation.
That's your...
Yes.
Okay. Chair, I see Ms. Hofmeyer is focusing only on supply development.
Okay,
no, I want to give you an
said.
example. Yes, I'm giving you an example. Just bear with me.
But remember,
I want something that is the same.
that's fine, but I want
Yes.
you to focus on commenting on whether my
That one,
expectation
yes,
of what
yes.
would be expected from
From
you as
me.
HOD of procurement, whether it's correct.
Yes, I like giving examples. So like there's reciprocal work there. Also, it has a bracket that says include proposer.
No, start by saying, yes, I agree, that would be expected from me as HOD, or no, I don't agree, that would not be expected. Then if you need to give an example, then I can follow. Let's clear that part first.
Okay, you said that what would be expected from me as an HOD is to do what?
Is to know what the requirements are for proper procurement processes at SAT, and if there is a critical requirement such as this, you would be expected to know what it is, number one. You would be expected to know how it is adjudicated. So that if CFST, for example, did not apply it the way it should be applied, you would be able to say, no, CFST, you are not applying this the way it should be applied. That is my expectation. That expectation may be wrong because maybe that's not what your job description was, but that would be what I would expect from head of procurement. Is my expectation correct or not?
Your expectation, must I tell a judge is incorrect? I don't feel confident.
You can tell me it's incorrect.
I don't
tell me it's incorrect.
I don't want to put it that way.
Because
I don't want to put it
know
that
the
way.
policies, yes.
Your expectation
Yeah.
is reasonable.
Okay.
I think I might be, yes.
Okay.
It is reasonable and justifiable. But you said, from the HOD SCM is expected to know the processes of procurement that have to be followed. That is one thing that I'm not even, it's something that I follow or maybe adhere to all the time. Remember, the processes of procurement are stated in the PPPFA, the Constitution 217, the PFMA and stuff like that. Something different from what is expected from the CFST that are doing the evaluation, right? So you see, if I actually had access to get in there in the CFST and sit there and decide with them and evaluate with them, then I would say your expectation of me are correct. But and if I was sitting here today, or maybe for the past 3 days, I'm being questioned about the process that was not followed, and then there was an Auditor General finding that said, okay, in this procurement at SAT, these were not done according to the procurement processes in the public sector. I'm not sitting here for that. I'm sitting here answering questions that have nothing to do with procurement processes at SAT. You understand? But it's just about the CFST that did they accept the commitment as it is, or did they just say yes or no? And my uncomfort also, Chair, is the fact that this question is actually only just directed to one specific bidder, not all of them.
Let's continue.
Thank you, Chair. Ooh, thank you, Chair. Ms. Memela, the reason why I'm focusing on the aspect of supplier development is because it was one of 2 reasons why the board overturned the recommendation from the acting CEO to award this tender to Air France.
Oh, can we go to the board resolution?
Of course we can.
Thank
Let's
you.
go there. DD 22F, page 2305.
DD 22F.
Probably I don't need to go there.
Probably not, Chair.
Yeah.
We've read it a number of times,
Yeah.
Okay.
and where relevant, we'll just read it
Okay.
into the record.
Yes.
DD
Well, read it.
22F.
Maybe once you have read it, Ms. Memela might not need to look at it.
Yes.
But if you need to look at it, please, is the file there that has got it?
Oh, I thought you said like we must not.
No, I was talking for myself.
Oh, okay.
But if you do need to look at it, it's fine. But she will read it.
It's DD 22F, page 2305. Oh, I see Ms. Mbanjwa.
Ms.
wants to say
Mbanjwa?
something.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to point out that the witness has said this line of questioning is unfair to her because she
Ms.
does not
Mbanjwa,
sit on the
Ms. Mbanjwa, this line of questioning is legitimate. Please
you,
sit
Chair.
down.
Before we look at the resolution, Ms. Memela, I understood your evidence earlier to be what was required under that critical criteria was simply an indication, yes, there would be the commitment required of value, and so the details of the proposal did not need to be provided with the bid, correct? Now, you see, what concerns me about that is when the board met on the 9th of May and they rejected the acting CEO's recommendation that this award be given to Air France, the minute of the meeting reflects the following. The submission was tabled, that's the acting CEO's submission, and considered. According to the submission, management recommended that the tender be awarded to Air France. A discussion on the matter ensued and the board made the following comments. Management's rationale for recommendations that Air France be awarded the tender was not substantive, considering the bidder's resistance to align itself with SART's developmental agenda, i.e. supplier development. Furthermore, the benefits as outlined by the submission as a result of selecting Air France were not compelling enough to position the latter as the preferred bidder. I'd like to focus on the first reason. The board sits on the 9th of May. It decides for one of two reasons not to go with the recommendation it's received to award it to Air France. And the reason it gives is because Air France's tender was not substantive considering the bidder's resistance to align itself with SART's developmental agenda, i.e. supplier development.
Yes.
How could they possibly have made that evaluation if there wasn't a proposal required that could be compared?
Thank you. Thanks for asking that. Chair, the Air France that we are talking about, like Ms. Hofmeyer's question is that how will they have reached that conclusion since there was no proposal made? Remember, Air France was the current supplier for component for SART since 2008, right? And like during that time until 2016, Air France has given nothing back to this country through that contract. And like that could have been supply development, or maybe since supply development was not applicable maybe back then, it could have been through NIP obligation, but I can tell you now, Chair, through their representative, like that was staying here in South Africa for years, being paid through the same contract that is paid with the money coming from this country. They could have maybe appointed or gotten a South African, gave them that job to say, okay, you will be our representative, we will train you, you will represent our contract in South Africa. That's what it meant, like it is meant about giving back to the country. But like from 2008 to 2016, Air France had a contract, a component contract with SART for all those years. They never adhered to either NIP obligation nor any other transformational agenda. My understanding of that statement by the board, they are not referring to the tender process that was ran in 2016. They are referring to the contract that started in 2008 that they never adhered to the laws of this country. You see, Chair, like I think for me, the way I'm quite passionate about like things that have to do with BEE and empowering black-owned suppliers, black people and stuff like these things touch me because, I mean, we are quick to say for instance, state capture is standing for South Africa as a state, and questioning everything that may have we had our money spent, like, I mean, irregularly. like taxpayers' money. But like we are unable to question European countries and all the other countries like that are given huge contracts from us, South Africa, and they are not giving back to this country. The purpose of NIP obligation was to ensure that these people, when they get this billion rand of contract, they give back to this country. We don't have schools, we don't have hospitals, nothing, and they enjoy our money for free.
Yes. Now, do you know, as a fact, that during those years you talked about from 2008?
Yes, Chair.
Do you know for a fact that
Air France.
the position was that Air France maybe had given a positive undertaking or commitment but failed to do what they had promised to do, that would have either fallen under a NIP obligation or supply development, or is the position that they had even refused to commit themselves? Do you know what the position is?
Chair, I know for a fact that, as Advocate Hofmeyr has been stating here for the last 3 days, that supply development, like NIP obligation, is an obligation. And I also explained that like it's an obligation, but controlled and managed by the DTI. She read the affidavit from DTI, you see, and remember the duty of SOC
but
at
remember,
that time. No, I'm answering your question.
Answer the question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The duty of an SOC at that time is to just notify DTI, right? And then, then the communication will be between DTI and Air France. But like I'm saying, I know for a fact from 2008 until the end of that contract, Air France had never delivered anything according to the laws of this country, meaning giving back to the economy of this country.
The contract that they were having in 2017? The contract, is that the one that had been running from 2008?
Yes, Chair.
And they tendered for this one,
yes, Chair,
as well?
Yes.
And now the supply development requirement began in 2013?
At around 2013, Chair.
Around 2013.
Yes. Now, but if you notice, I referred to NIP obligation.
Yes.
Yes.
Before that.
Because remember, NIP obligation has been in place since 1997.
For longer. Yes.
So like they can't come up with an excuse that okay,
Yeah.
because supply development was not there and
Yeah.
stuff. But like NIP obligation was there.
Yeah.
That 30% from their contract should have came to this country through DTI. So of course, like questions should be asked from DTI. Maybe they have their reasons why they let them go scot-free. We don't know.
Ms. Memela, a moment ago in your testimony, you said that you believe the board did not reject Air France on this basis, based on their tender, but on the basis of their previous performance under other contracts. Is that correct?
Do you recall having given that evidence? If you don't recall, you may have, you may not.
Or it's like maybe they said based on their previous performance and stuff.
Yes.
The reason why she's starting by asking you is that she doesn't want to put you a question and then you have a fight about whether you said that. She wants to clear that out of the way, that you remember that was your evidence. You don't remember, or you do remember?
Can you repeat your question?
Yes.
Maybe, yeah.
I tried to take a note of it word for word. You said the board did not reject Air France for supplier development reasons based on the current tender. What they were looking at is the failures of Air France previously under all their other contracts with SART to make an adequate commitment to supplier development. Is that correct?
I seem to remember that you said so as well. That's
just
my
now,
recollection. No, yesterday.
Yesterday.
Before, yeah. Well, you might have repeated now.
I said, the supply development, they had listed it as a reason, one of the reasons. And just 2 minutes or 3 minutes ago, I actually just gave an example that Air France had a contract with SART and never adhered to the NIP obligation. So like I said, okay, supply development may have been one of that, you know, and also the additional reason, I think it was the risk that they had listed.
Ms. Memela, I'm not focused on the second reason. I'm focused on the supplier development reason. I understand your evidence before this commission to be. The board did not have a concern about Air France's commitment to supplier development in this tender. It was concerned about previous failures on the part of Air France to commit adequately to supplier development.
Oh, yes,
is that correct?
In respect of other contracts.
Yes, no, I agree. They did not, I doubt they had a concern because remember, France had bidded with Kwane Capital, so they adhered to the final contract.
Yeah, you see, Ms. Memela, let me tell you what the problem with that is.
Oh.
The problem is that it means Air France could never have been awarded this tender by the board.
Oh, why?
Let me explain why. Air France and AAR JM Aviation both indicated on that critical criteria in their bid submissions, yes, to supplier development. They made the commitment. And that was made clear to the board in the submission from the acting CEO. So in terms of the bid requirements, Air France and JM Aviation and AR gave exactly the same commitment to supplier development. But the board sat on the 9th of May, and despite that, decided that it was not going to award this tender to the recommended bidder because of some historic non-commitment to supplier development. And if that is so, the process was grossly irregular, and there was no prospect of Air France ever winning that tender. Do you have a comment on it?
Yes, Ms. Memela.
I'm really confused, Chair. Maybe because I've ran this the procurement process.
Okay, let me put it.
I don't know because there is no way here that says.
Let me put it to you this way. Let me put it this way. You gave evidence this morning in regard to the supplier development requirement that all that was required of a bidder under supplier development is to indicate yes, which would be a commitment on their part to doing what is expected under supplier development.
Yes, Chair.
You said it was not required of a bidder at the time of submitting their bid to give any details, really, and much, as long as it said yes.
Yes, Chair.
So Ms. Hofmeyer is saying to you, when the board had to consider whether to go along with the recommendation of the CEO that Air France should be the one awarded, and they decided that no, that should not happen, it should be AAR. Their reason, insofar as they said it's on supply development, could not be legitimate because the answers that were given by both Air France and AAR were exactly the same in regard to supplier development. She says if the answers are exactly the same and a bidder is not required to give any details, just the answer yes is good enough, then it must be good enough for each one of them. So she is saying then this reason advanced by the board doesn't make sense.
Chair.
What do you say?
I say, Chair, in this board resolution, it does not say, like, I mean, because I remember even yesterday I said sometimes the minute taking differ from one company secretary to the other. So here, the company secretary says, here are the following comments that were made by the board. And the board made the comment that management's rationale for recommendation that Air France be awarded the tender was not substantive, considering the bidder's resistance to align itself to South African development agenda, that is supply development. Furthermore, the benefits as outlined by the submission as a result of the selecting Air France were not compelling enough to position the latter as the preferred bidder. But Ms. Hofmeyer, when she reads this, she reads it as if the board declined the recommendation by the acting CEO because of supply development.
Well,
so you see, I mean, these were the comments that were made in the board meeting.
Hang on. She said one of the reasons given was supply development. Ms. Hofmeyer?
Indeed, Chair.
Are you saying that is not true? It was not one of the reasons?
What she had stated, like, it's a pity, I wouldn't want for us to go back to the transcript and stuff, but like she even said because.
But what I want you to start by saying is whether you say it's not true that that's one of the reasons the board gave, or you say it is true, but I have this to add.
In their discussion, Chair, the company secretary has recorded
Let's
this
start
as
with
their discussion.
Let's start the way I'm saying. Was it one of the reasons? Then you can add if you want to add.
It was one of the reasons was stated in the comment, but it couldn't be a reason to reject the recommendation.
It was a reason
the way
for
it
what?
Was put,
it was a reason for what?
Remember,
it was
Chair,
given as a reason for what?
Remember, Chair, when my understanding is that like the board is not expected. I'm not a board member, right? But like my understanding, like of corporate governance or company law, is that I mean the board does not sit there to rubber stamp whatever is put in front of them.
No, let's not go there. The question is not about that. The question is, well, one, you have said that it was one of the reasons. So my question is, it was one of the reasons for what? Because Ms. Hofmeyer says it was one of the reasons given by the board for rejecting the CEO's recommendation
in
that Air France should be given. Yeah, so
in supply chain, she made a statement that the board, like it looks like the Air France wouldn't have won anyway because the board.
Let's not go to the statement. Let's go to the one that I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Hofmeyer says the board. One of the reasons given by the board why they did not accept the CEO's proposal or recommendation that Air France should be awarded was supply development.
She said she's not interested in the other reason.
You say it was one of the reasons, but not for rejecting. So I'm asking the question: what was it given as a reason for then?
For me, what I read there, Chair, maybe our interpretation then may not be the same. But like what I read there, they are, the board before it make a decision, my understanding is that like they go through discussions and discuss and raise their concerns here and there and stuff like, so how this, this paragraph is recorded here, it says like, the board made the following comments. And then like here it stated that, okay, they even raised that like because they have not adhered to the supply development and wara. So like for me, I'm interpreting this as a comment, not the reason that like the board relied on to make their final decision.
Ms. Memela, we are going to move on. You just said earlier on it was a reason, but not for the rejection of the CEO's recommendation.
Okay, Chair.
Yes, okay, all right. Let's move on.
Thank you, Chair. I do intend to move to a different topic. That is just the steps taken to follow up on the compliance by AAR and JM Aviation of their contractual obligations under the tender.
The steps taken by?
So it's what was your role in relation to ensuring that the commitments that had been given by JM Aviation and AAR under the contract were being fulfilled? Did you play any role in that regard?
Of course, like there will be discussions, but like they will not be run by me. They will be run by the unit that is responsible for that, being BEE and supply development, following up and discussing what is it that have to be in the proposal. As I said earlier, Chair, that okay, they would sit with local supplier and discuss what needs to be there, and then like they might call me in if they need my guidance on certain things and stuff. Yeah.
And the other contractual commitments, like having a site manager in place at site? Is that something you were following up on?
Site managers also, it's part of the, site manager will be part of the proposal that is put in place. And I remember like there was a small program that was run by BEE and Supplier Development Unit that they were actually arranging office space for BEE companies like to have offices at site, so that like when they are working with these multinational companies, at least they are within the site. So that will be part of the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just interested to know who would follow up about that.
It will be Ms. Princess Shabalala who was finding out, okay, where is the office? Maybe she will find a space where there's a scrap that is sitting there that is no longer used, and try and see if it could be open for some suppliers. But like she was not only doing it for JM, like there were lots of other suppliers that were given office space, including Ms. Sambo, who has been with other BEE suppliers, been kicked out by Mr. Skalkumen. They no longer have the office space at site. It's a reversal actually of the transformational agenda.
Chair, I see that we are just past the tea adjournment.
Yes, I just noticed too.
I'm sorry,
I have
Chair.
to say in my defense, I truly did not anticipate this level of debate on my question about supplier development.
Yes.
But possibly it's convenient to take a short adjournment and return. I'm in your hands.
Well, we can take it now or take it at past, but if it's convenient to take it now, we can
I think we can take it now, indeed.
Okay, let's take the tea adjournment. We'll resume, it's 20 past now, we'll resume at 25 to 12.
Thank you, Chair.
All rise.
a full-time rep on the premises and to support the day-to-day operations at site. And his evidence was that has never been done. Did you follow up on that when you were in the procurement position?
Did I follow up that there was a rep?
Yes.
Chair, as I had explained earlier, that my understanding, all the BEE suppliers like that are representing, either they are multinational suppliers or they are coming on their own, where head offices arrange for them to be there at site. So if I remember correctly, there was someone from JM, but like I never got to meet them because like, remember there was a senior manager BEE and supply development that was running that. Yes.
This was a specific, sorry, apologies.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure what is the view of Mr. Human. Remember, Mr. Human has never been there when these transactions happened. He was only asked to act in my previous position, I think, just last year. So whatever he's giving here is either hearsay or
based on documentation.
Yeah.
He made the point that he had no personal knowledge of a lot of things, but he had looked at records, and mostly he was giving evidence based on records.
Yes, but my understanding also is that like maybe in his position he would have met with the current supplier to find out if that had happened.
His evidence was that it hadn't, and it wasn't a general BEE supplier facility at SART. It's a contractual obligation that JM Aviation have an on-site representative to assist on the day-to-day performance under the contract. Did you ever check whether there was a JM Aviation representative performing that role after the contract was concluded?
I've never checked that, Chair, because there was a representative who's responsible for that who reports to me, and the reporting was that like there was somebody who's coming from JM and there was somebody who's coming from SAT, from AR, who's able to answer some technical questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then just the obligation to have the joint venture between JM Aviation and AAR incorporated within 12 months of the agreement. Are you aware of that obligation?
There is an obligation to
have JM Aviation and AIR's joint venture incorporated within a year.
Yes, I think I do remember that, Chair.
Did anyone follow up on that?
I think we had followed up, but like not me specifically, and I'm not sure how far it is right now, because like remember like I don't follow up like on behalf of the people that are responsible for certain roles.
So by July 2018, they needed to have an incorporated joint venture and they needed to have a local bank account. To your knowledge, did anyone follow up on whether they had fulfilled that obligation?
In 2018, Chair, I was already out of sight, so
sorry,
I would know.
I meant, apologies. By July 2017, they had to have complied with those obligations.
I have no knowledge of, yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Memela, on the first day of your evidence, which I have to say right now feels many days ago, I'm sure for you as well.
Me too as well.
You raised the issue that I took you to a conflict of interest policy at a point.
Yeah.
And it was the SAA group policy, and on the front page of it, it said recommended for adoption by subsidiaries.
Yes.
And you raised a concern about you weren't aware of it, and that was there some proof that it had been adopted or not. So pursuant to that request, Chair, we engaged the person who heads compliance and governance at SAA. It's Mr. Chardy, and he's been in that position since 2011. He has provided an affidavit to the Commission. Unless Ms. Memela wants to go there, I don't think it's necessary for you to go there, Chair. The upshot of what Mr. Chardy says, and you can certainly respond to it if you'd like to, Ms. Memela.
I would like to.
It's in DD 25B at page 752.
752.
Yes, it should be right towards the end. Mr. Chardy says there that he confirms he's the Compliance and Governance Officer at South African Airways, and he makes it clear he's been holding that position since 1 March 2011. I'm just going to paraphrase for the purposes of this point. He indicates that the conflict of interest policy which group compliance is the custodian of, is a group policy applicable to SAA, its subsidiary. Apologies.
I'm still trying to find.
Oh, I didn't realize
Ms.
that.
Badra wants the page
It's
number.
752.
I found it, Chair.
I'm just waiting
Okay.
for Ms. Mbandra to get there. Thank you. So what Mr. Chadi goes on to say is that the conflict of interest policy, which group compliance is the custodian of, is a group policy applicable to SAA, its subsidiaries and outstations. The scope of the policy does include all subsidiaries of SAA, and that includes SAA Technical. And he goes on and says, in the absence of a conflict of interest policy or any policy at the subsidiary level having been adopted, the group conflict of interest policy or group policy shall be applicable. So what Ms. Memela had been asking for the other day is evidence that it had been adopted. What Mr. Chadi has clarified for us is that the default is that it applies, but it will only not apply if some other policy has been adopted, as I read his affidavit. Oh, I'm sorry, I see there's a...
Yes, Ms. Mbandra.
Thank you, Chair. The way I understand it, if a policy has been adopted, the adoption of the policy will be self-evident on the policy itself, or there will be a resolution to say such a policy is adopted. Adoption of a policy cannot be done by means...
That, Ms. Mbandra, you can use in your re-examination or in argument.
And then he just clarifies further that the actual conflict of interest policy that we dealt with in the evidence on Friday was applicable to SART at the time and is still applicable currently, as no other conflict of interest policy has been adopted by SART previously and currently. And then he concludes by indicating that there's a process of annual internal communication to remind employees and to alert them of the conflict of interest policy that was issued through SAA. Chair, he doesn't explain it there, but it's the internal email communication within SAA in or around April 2016, and he indicates that they received declarations from SAA and SART employees over the years, except that not everyone has complied. And then what follows that in the bundle is just some screenshots of when that was sent out, which include Ms. Memela as a recipient. You'll see that, Ms. Memela, at page 754. Do you have any basis to dispute what Mr. Chadi is saying here?
Chair.
Well, let's start by confirming that you know Mr. Chabi, because he says he has been there since 2011. You know him.
I'm getting there,
and
Chair.
You know him as compliance officer or whatever the position.
Chair, I wanted to correct that, that the statement that has been made by Ms. Hofmeyer. She said Mr. Chadi is the head of risk and compliance for SAA. She is not.
I think she may have been taking that from the affidavit.
Apologies.
No, it's not here.
If I had said that it was in error,
yeah,
let me read it correctly. I am the Compliance and Governance Officer at South African Airways.
Yes, okay.
Yes, so I just had to correct her statement, because that's what she put out there on the public, that he is the head.
Okay.
So yes, I know Mr. Chadi, yes.
Yes, okay. And the question was whether you dispute what he says there.
I dispute it to a certain extent, that he's saying if there's like some of the subsidiaries have not adopted the policy, automatically this one does. Apply, exactly.
That you accept.
No, I'm saying I dispute that.
Oh, you say you dispute
exactly,
that.
Because maybe if Ms. Hofmeyer can actually show me that provision within that, because it should not just be coming from Mr. Chadi, it should also be stated in the policy that failure by each subsidiary to adopt their own that is applicable to them. Therefore, this one automatically applies. I will tell you why I say that, Shade, because the SCM policy is the group policy, and like there is where it talks about applicability. It says that this policy applies to group SAA, and unless where it is stated otherwise. So, like, I mean, in that, then it shows that, okay, there is a chapter that talks to SAT, And then like where SAT, like because where SAT is the technical side of SAA, it talks about like the procurement processes of SAT. So I'm saying I don't agree with Mr. Chadi. It's his version, and I'm stating my version.
Am I right to say you say the reason why you dispute what he says is because, as far as you know, there is nothing in writing that confirms that?
Yes, I'm saying, if there was something in that policy, like the SCM policy says, okay, unless stated otherwise, automatically, if the subsidiary does not adopt its own policy, this one automatically applies.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Ms. Hofmeyer?
So when the policy says this conflict of interest policy shall be applicable to SAA Group, does that not mean what it says? Let me give you the reference. It's in DD 25A.
I don't have to go there, Chair, but I'm saying yes. Policies are specifics. For instance, like this one, it says outside to be adopted by subsidiaries. And then, like I said, okay, but like there's none that is adopted that I know of that should be signed by the board of SAT. My understanding is that SAT is the separate company from SAA with its own registration number, with its own policies and stuff. So, like, I mean, this one should also be there signed by the board and the accounting officer of SAT being the CEO.
So you are saying, in the absence of a resolution by the board of SAT saying we are adopting this policy, and in the absence of something in the policy itself saying that if SAT doesn't have its own policy, this policy will apply, you say in the absence of those two things,
yes,
you dispute his
I dispute
evidence.
his statement.
Okay.
And I even gave an example of SM, Chair, and I'm now giving you an example of the DOA. SAA, for instance, has got its own DOA, which is also run by the same Mr. Chadi's department. And then like SAA has got its own DOA, and then SAT has got its own separate DOA that is signed by the board and the CEO of SAT.
Okay.
Ms. Memela, in fairness to you, the clause that I read does go on.
Yeah.
It says, it's clause 1.7 at page 439 of Annexure DD 25A. It says this conflict of interest policy shall be applicable to the SAA Group. It then reads, the policy shall be presented to all subsidiaries EXCO for adoption.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chadi seems to have been conducting compliance and governance at SAA with a position that said unless there's a contrary policy adopted, the group policy applies. I understand your evidence to be unless there's a specific adoption, it won't apply to SAT. Is that right?
That's right.
So what conflict of interest provisions did apply to SAT employees for them to be able to give their annual declarations of interest?
I don't remember any conflict of interest policy, Chair, at SAT that is written. As you had read correctly there, Ms. Hofmeyer, that the department risk and compliance should be going to subsidiaries and present to EXCO and stuff. I don't remember because, as I said, first I was the minute taker for EXCO before I became an EXCO member. So I would remember this kind of decision being taken.
Thank you. Ms. Memela, I'd like to then conclude with your evidence. And in order to do so, we have had evidence over 4 days,
yes,
well, 3.5 now.
Yes, ma'am.
And so what I propose to do is to identify 9 highlighting features of the evidence over the past 4 days, and I want to give you an opportunity to respond to those because it's an effort to round up what we've covered over the period.
Okay, so you're going to highlight, finish, and then I respond?
No, I'll do one by one because it is a list of 9, unless you'd like me to give all 9.
No, one by one is much more convenient. Because if you have to respond to 9, can you imagine?
Quite challenging, indeed.
No, I was not going to. I thought she would just round up, read everything, and then I would respond in one go.
No, it's much more convenient if she takes one by one, and then you respond. Then it's clear what is being put to you. It's clear what your answer is, and then she moves to the next one.
Ms.
And
Memela,
it will move quite quicker with crisp answers.
With yes, no, yes, no. Okay, I'm hoping that the style of questioning will be like that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But remember that I want crisp answers, but if you feel strongly that you need to explain something, I will keep an eye on that.
So what I put to you, Ms. Memela, is that the evidence over the last 4 days has shown the following. First, that despite the fact that the head of line maintenance, Mr. Makaleng, and the acting CEO at the time, Mr. Piri, established the book value of the GPUs that were to be sold and communicated that book value to the SART board when it took the decision to sell the GPUs, you did not consider the book value of the GPUs when you negotiated with JM Aviation.
And you can say, that's not true, I did take it into account, or it's not true, or it's true, I did not take it into account. And then if you need to explain.
That's not true, Chair.
That's not true.
Yeah, they did not establish any book value other than us in writing down on his submission to the board. And then Chile raising that he was not happy. Yeah, so.
Okay.
And in the course of your negotiations with JM Aviation about the price at which SART would sell the GPUs, you did not establish the fair market value of the GPUs.
Yes, Chair, because there was no tender that was ran. The only time procurement establishes fair value is go through tenders. Yes.
The third is that you supported the SART board's decision to award the components tender to AAR and JM Aviation as justifiable. And that was at a time when there were calls from the SAA chairperson for SART to cancel the contract. Is that correct?
Just please.
Well, she says, is that correct? And your answer should start with, yes, it is correct, or no, it is not correct.
Okay, sure.
Then you can explain if you need to explain.
Of course, based on the board minutes that she had read for me, but I do remember that Ms. Tutumieni was extremely not happy about the board decision. And when, on the 15th of June, when this was discussed in the board meeting, it was us now standing up for SAT, not who has made what decision and who's against what, who does not support. I still stand by my version saying we were all shocked by that decision by the board that, okay, they just made that decision there, but they had their own reasons. Yeah, I'm done.
So you won't say whether you supported or you did not support, but you have made your comment.
Yes, because it gives a certain, yes, because of that, those board minutes and what was discussed there in June, and after the board had justified responding to Ms. Tutumieni why this was done, and National Treasury, yes.
The fourth is that you failed to disclose to anyone else at SART that JM Aviation had been communicating with you and sending you their bid proposal and JV agreement 5 days before their bid was due to be submitted for the final tender. Is that correct?
It's correct, Chair. I did not disclose because I don't sit in evaluation team.
And you've accepted, I think previously in your evidence, that communication alone ought to have disqualified them from the bid, correct?
That communication with the evaluation team, the people, because even the document says this document, and they're the ones who know that document. I said that okay, if I was sitting there, it would have disqualified them.
No, Ms. Memela, I recall your evidence to be, but you can tell me if you want to retract from that position. You said you weren't aware of it at the time, but I put it to you that if you had been aware of it, whether it would have been in breach of the requirements of the RFB for JM Aviation to communicate at all with you, and I understood your answer to be yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
The fifth is that you allowed a contract to be concluded between JM Aviation and AAR, which had various detrimental clauses in it to SART. Is that correct?
I allowed. That's not true, Chair. There's a person who's responsible for that, who leads the negotiations and stuff.
And that was Ms. Mbeki in your view?
Yes, Chair.
Albeit that she was subordinate to you and reported to you, correct?
She reported to me, but yes, she was leading the legal and contracts management, so that is her role. Yes. And of course, always when there are other issues that she's not happy with, for instance, like I'll make an example here quickly. The fact that, like she said, she was not happy with the penalty, being not like in the contract.
You remember,
yes.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that, like, I had a very close relationship with my staff, and like that's something that she would have raised with me, and then like I would have supported her and saw how we closed that gap. But instead, like, she continued, and like maybe the contract would have been reviewed and amended. And remember, like, there were lots of other negotiations after the contract was signed, so it would have been reviewed if she had raised that. Yeah.
Ms. Bajwa, has it fallen away?
Slightly, Chair, just to confirm quickly. I just want to know, because the statement is the contract was detrimental to SARS. Are those detrimental aspects?
You wanted the respects in which it was detrimental. Okay.
It resulted in a BER rate, contribution of 65% as opposed to the 70% that was stipulated in the request for bid. Should I go a bit slower?
Oh, okay.
There was a BER rate ultimately concluded, which did not follow the 70% contribution required in the RFB, but that was reduced to 65%.
Do
you want to respond? Sure.
Oh, yes.
The BER rate that was stated there, that's exactly what I had made an example earlier on that. That's one thing that if we don't have a background of, or also the public out there does not understand the background, of course it will be taken as such. But the BER, my understanding, it involves like the repairs, some of the spares are damaged and they have to be sent back for repair, and there are certain days that, like, I mean, it needs to take for SAT to send back. But so far, while I was still there, Chair, is the fact that, like, when I called the meeting, like, after a complaint about that, there was a report that proved that actually it was from SAT's side that there was even that there was even those charges from AAR side of late submission of the spares and all that. Like, I mean, so like it's a bit technical. So I think it will work even much better if a technician explains better. But I'm saying it was from SAT side that was lacking. So they were supposed to actually follow a certain period to send, and then, like, I mean, the spare gets repaired and comes back, but they would wait for 72 and then until replace that spare with a new one, and they end up charging SAT. So the problem now is from operations or materials management failure to manage that part. Yes.
Okay.
There was no inclusion of a penalty clause in favor of SAT.
Oh, okay. I think I've already answered that, Chair.
Well, what Ms. Hofmeyer is continuing to do is to specify the respects in which the contract was prejudicial to SAT.
To SAT, okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
You have talked about penalties, but do you accept that the absence of such a penalty in favor of SAT was prejudicial to SAT?
If that is the case, of course, like after I've seen that,
yes, okay.
it was a bit prejudicial, but yeah. I think if it was raised by the person who was managing legal and contracts, the contract would have been reviewed before we added, like, I mean, the list of aircrafts on the contract.
Okay.
Yes, you'll recall Ms. Mbeki's challenge was that she never had an opportunity to review it because it was suddenly signed on the 7th of July. Do you recall that?
Remember, Ms. Hofmeyer, the contract is still running, Chair. I traveled with Ms. Mbeki to London to negotiate with AAR, like in terms of additional aircraft and other things in the contract. So my understanding is that, like, before we left South Africa with Mr. Mike Kenny as well, she would have said, okay, you know what, I think this is an opportunity. And then tell me also that, boss, actually, I never heard the side of the contract before it was signed because that was never reported to me. You understand? So, like, I mean, when we go there, would have then said, okay, other than, because I remember before we flew to London, we discussed certain things that we have to make sure that are added in the contract. And she was there being the one who's talking on the legal framework. So my understanding is that like she should have pushed also for that, or maybe let me and Mike Kenny understand that, okay, the penalty is not there, therefore it should be reviewed. So that amendment, it would have like added the penalty.
Did you see fit to review the contract at any point to check that it adequately protected SART?
Chair, I would have seen it adequate to review the contract if the person who's responsible for managing the contract had raised certain gaps within the contract. Because my understanding also, like before I brought Cookie in, I was holding her position before I joined procurement. So my understanding is that when you manage a contract, you go through it and then raise certain gaps that, okay, actually, this is not to the benefit of the company. Therefore, like to close this gap, this is what I need to do. I always say sometimes if there is some sort of unhappiness like within the contract between two parties, there is nothing that stops both parties to sit down again and say, okay, hey, well, maybe it was done in a rush or something like that. Let's sit and see if we could close that gap. I don't remember that being raised.
There was no inclusion of an escape clause or a termination clause for SART to extricate itself from the contract. Was that, in your view, to SART's prejudice?
That, if it's true, Chair, it's also quite
prejudicial.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, that's my understanding from the legal point of view and the person who has managed the contracts before. Yeah.
And the obligation to make the upfront deposit payment. Do you regard that as having been prejudicial to SART?
Sure. In that day, that first day when we sat there, when I admitted that I was actually sitting during the negotiation, I remember we fought tooth and nail. I was sitting there watching her, supporting her as she was negotiating on behalf of the company. And she pushed back, and remember AR having to show the whole team that it is their policy, their board would not even approve this if this is not done and stuff like. So I'm saying now from that side, that was really defended during the negotiation. That's why then there was that kind of like, I mean, the agreement at the end that say, okay, maybe they could have it spread over 6 months, but like, I mean, that didn't happen. You've established that.
They didn't, it wasn't a provision of the tender that they would be entitled to that upfront payment, was it?
It was not the provision of the tender. It was not in the tender, Chair. I think that's the reason why we were really skeptical about it.
But they won that bargain, it seems.
They
won that bargain.
They won.
Yes.
Well, do I say yes or no, Chair?
If Ms. Mbeki didn't get what she wanted for SART, you say yes.
Okay, yes, I guess like she didn't get what she wanted.
I think I've given the respects in which it was detrimental. I'll now move to the next element to round up the evidence. Ms. Memela, you also failed to alert...
I'm sorry, Ms. Memela.
Also, I thought these were 9.
No, she's going back. She had to pause on the 9 and deal with and give you the respects in which she says the contract was prejudicial to SART. Okay. Now she's going back to her it might be the 4th or the 5th. Yeah.
I think I might be on
can I take the water?
Somebody will bring you water.
Okay.
Will somebody bring her water, please?
The next is that you failed...
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Memela, the next is that you failed to alert finance to the fact that the contract with JM Aviation and AAR did not in fact require an upfront cash payment to be made.
Do you want the question to be repeated?
No, I'm hearing it. It's just I was not aware that I had there was that expectation from me to alert finance when finance was sitting during negotiation, and CFO sits at Exco, and understanding is that he knew exactly what was happening.
Do you remember the email communications where the finance person says, I need to ask Ms. Memela about this, and then you respond with, according to the contract?
Yes, that's what I had explained, Ms. Hofmeyer, yesterday, that, and you actually even went back to that provision and said maybe that was the provision that I was talking about. It's under some technical thing, like it talks about 3 months contract. I said, like, we were supposed to have according to the negotiations and stuff. So it's not like they paid this deposit up front because I had responded to that email. There were lots of processes, Chair, that were followed before the payment was made. Even Dev Area, the CFO, the former CFO, even explained that he had to push hard, like there's his email that I read. He had to push hard for things to be done. And of course, it's not paid from SAT. As you saw, it had to go to the group CFO of SAA, go through the trade of SAA, who has to look at certain things, you know, like, so I'm sure it was not it was not expected of me to be the one to say, okay, pay, or maybe, as you say, maybe that payment was made because I wrote that email. I don't think so.
You were the only person who advised on the contract and what it provided.
I was not the person who advised on the contract and what it provided. Chair, because of my experience, like in terms of like contracts management, once the contract is in place, or maybe finance has an obligation to familiarize themselves of the provisions, especially if like they are lazy. I know when you're not a lawyer, you're not really go through the whole contract or whatever. Just go through the payment part, or maybe wherever that it talks about the deposit and whatever, and know that like this is what is expected from them. For me, I think Ms. Hofmeyer, she saw those emails with me writing and stuff like, and I did say that the reason why I played that role was because my fear was that if we don't pay whatever that we expected to pay as per the contract, there will be an AOG, aircraft on the ground. And once the aircraft is on the ground because of the lack of spares, the first person who gets blamed is me. And that's one thing that I always take accountability of, you see, where it comes to the provision of spares, because that's the duty of procurement, to provide spares to operation to run.
Do you accept that you were responsible for contract management at SART?
I don't accept, Chair. I said before Ms. Kukenberg came in, I held her position before I joined procurement. So I was responsible for managing contracts, and I was fully involved in there. So
at the time when you occupied the position
of Ms. Kukenberg, yes. And then I don't know if you remember, I highlighted on Friday, Ms. Hofmeyer, I don't know if you remember about the structure, that the contract management at that time when I was in that position, it was reporting to commercial. So I reported to the then GM commercial, Mr. Asin Malolapiri, and then during the restructuring, it was agreed to move to.
We might not need to go that
okay.
far. Your answer is
no.
As HOD SAM.
I don't manage contracts.
That was not part of your responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah, it had been part when you were occupying another position.
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Ms. Memela, do you remember an issue being raised by Mr. Lionel LaRue in March of 2017 around the AAR JM Aviation contract and some of the articles that had been circulating in the media about it?
Okay. Or do we go?
I just want to ask, do you remember it?
Okay, I do remember. I remember that there are lots of communications, but I do remember.
Yeah, then she'll come with a question if there is a question.
There is just a follow-up, Chair, because Ms. Memela has been very emphatic in her evidence at the moment about not being responsible for contracts management. And I'd like to then take her to this email communication, if I may.
Yes.
I hadn't necessarily thought it would be necessary, but it seems to be. You'll find it in DD 25B at page 757.
Yes.
You see in the second half of that page, there's an email from Mr. Lionel LaRue in which he raises these issues about the AAR contract. I propose to paraphrase, unless, Ms. Memela, you think it's necessary for us to read the whole thing into the record.
No.
The issue that Mr. Lionel was raising...
Please read it.
Oh, you do want it read. Hi, colleagues. With regard to our conversation in the meeting on whether Flight Technical could join the SART contract, I've attached a few articles which was published on this contract. The first article states that it's a 5-year contract between SART and AAR Corporation in joint venture with JM Aviation, as it would cost 125 million US dollars. The second attachment is a request for an interim interdict by Air France against this maintenance contract. The High Court rejected this application, but it does indicate that AAR JV JM Aviation has submitted a final bid price of US dollars $82,476,062. It begs the question, why the huge increase between the contract and tender prices? And then he goes on to say the last two attachments deal with the Hawks investigation into Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas and his alleged involvement in an MOU between SART and AAR, which was signed in 2015. Please do further research to have a clearer understanding around the consideration to join this component maintenance contract.
Yeah.
He'd circulated that to people other than you.
Yeah.
And then what happens above that is Bongani Shabalala responds, Chair, I'm now in the middle of the page, to say, speak to Mario Dacuna or Mike Kenny, Lionel.
Yeah.
And then Mario Dacuna responds, you have to go back a page to 756. This is still on the 14th of March. And what Mario Dacuna says is, hi Bongani, I'm unable to positively answer your email as I don't have full knowledge of the AAR contract or the current status on any legal matters. I've copied Advocate Nontsasa and Cookie on this email. I'm sure they will be able to clarify your matters as set out in your email below. Regards.
Yes.
And then you respond at the top of page 756. And you say, Dear Lionel, I'm very surprised by your email. Does this mean you've forgotten already who to communicate with regarding any contracts that have gone through procurement? You worked for SART. You should know exactly which department is running these processes. Then you go into detail.
Yeah, you don't have to go there. Yeah.
Yes.
You can
So
ask
what I'm struggling with is why you would respond to a colleague on the basis that he should have been communicating with you and your department about contracts management and the terms of the contract that has gone through a tender process, if in your previous evidence you were saying you didn't play that role.
Chair,
Yes.
I'm sure you had Ms. Hofmeyer reading an email from Mr. Mario Dacuna, where he said, I'm unable to positively warawara, and he said, I have copied Advocate Nontsasa and Kukimbegi on this email. And then that first paragraph, it says, I'm very surprised by your email. Does this mean you have forgotten already who to communicate with? Lionel used to work for SART, and he understands that contracts are managed by legal and contract person. Exactly. So like that's exactly what I was saying, that he should have just communicated with the legal and contract person who manages these contracts so that he can get a proper idea of what was talked about, instead of going on Google and talk about a rumor from the media instead of the facts that are there. Ms. Kukimbeg would have given him the facts, because already he was talking about an increase. And when I asked in my email, please highlight where the increase is, he couldn't, because there were no facts. He was just relying on the article, on the media.
Well, is the position that Ms. Mbeki was the one responsible for managing contracts?
Yes, legal and contracts.
But she was reporting to you?
To me, yes.
I take it that the effect of that is that your portfolio, your department, your unit,
yes,
was responsible for contract management. Who within the unit who within the department internally was given that responsibility is something else. But your unit, your department was responsible for managing contracts. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, but my understanding of Ms. Hofmeyer is that I manage a contract, go through them and have that contracts registered. Therefore, I am the one who's managing contract.
No, you see, you are the head of department.
Yes, Chair.
You have to take responsibility for the performance of duties of those who report to you, isn't it? If something goes wrong within your department, the CEO is entitled to call you and not Ms. Mpeg and say, why are your subordinates not doing their job?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, Chair.
So from that point of view, is it not correct that it would be correct to say you were in charge of the department that was responsible for contract management?
Yes, I was in charge for the unit that was responsible for contracts
Okay.
management and other portfolios.
Okay.
Ms. Memela, in your interactions with finance about the payment of the deposit, you indicated to them that the contract required a cash deposit to be paid, and that was in circumstances where the contract did not require it. Do you have a comment on that?
Okay, repeat that, Ms. Hofmeyer.
When you were interacting with finance about the payment of the deposit, you indicated to finance that the contract required that the payment be made. And I put it to you, that was in circumstances when the contract actually didn't require a payment to be made.
Okay, I still stand by my version, Chair, that how I wrote that email meant that we were expected, or we were supposed to, I even read yesterday, we were supposed to have paid upfront and stuff, and then I even mentioned the 3 months deposit, which later was picked up in the contract by Ms. Hofmeyer and stuff. So I'm not agreeing to that. I'm still standing by my version.
Let me make sure I understand what you're talking about. You remember yesterday we talked a lot about the deposit.
The 3 months, yeah.
And I thought that when we had that discussion, ultimately you accepted, I thought, and you must tell me if I misunderstood, I thought you accepted that where the contract required payment of a deposit, it required nothing more than the provision of that credit letter or letter of credit guaranteed by a bank acceptable to AAR. Did I understand you correctly? That you accepted that that's what payment of deposit meant, the provision of that letter?
I accepted what the clause that was read by Ms. Hofmeyer from the contract.
Yes.
But I said the interpretation of my email to say finance was expected, because now how it's put, it's as if I instructed finance to pay cash or something like so. That's how she's putting it. But I'm saying yesterday I accepted how it was written, explaining the deposit. And then she went on and read some, when I asked if we could go back to the contract. And there was indeed where it was mentioned the 3 months, which confirmed what I had said in my email, where I said it was supposed to have been 3 months paid in advance or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, just to clarify, because I wasn't sure at some stage yesterday if I understood what you were talking about. Other than the payment of a deposit, as contemplated in the clause that we read yesterday that talked about the letter of credit.
Yeah.
Other than the payment of deposit provided for there, was there any payment of cash that the contract required to be made by SAT before anything, before the contract could, before performance by AAR?
No, Chair, other than the
there
deposit.
Was no?
No, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair.
It's just that there was reference to security at some stage.
Yes.
Security, I don't know whether it was security deposit, and I wasn't sure whether
it was security
that meant
deposit.
Whether that was another type of deposit, or it was the same
It was
deposit?
just the same deposit.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. So your evidence is you accept that in terms of the contract, there was no advance payment of cash that was required from SAT.
Yes, like I mean, in terms of the clause in
terms
the
of the
contract,
clause,
yes,
yeah.
it
Okay.
had stated down how
Okay.
it should be done.
All
yes.
right.
And Ms. Memela, all of those aspects of your role that I've highlighted took place at a time after JM Aviation paid the 1.2 million rand towards the purchase of your Bedford View house. Is that correct?
No, Chair.
Which one didn't happen after?
Okay, like they have happened after, but I'm just saying no to the link.
I'll get to the link in a moment.
Okay, yeah.
I just want to...
The question was just factual
Oh,
in terms
okay.
of time, yeah.
All right.
You accept that it was after.
It
in
was
terms of
after,
time,
yes.
The link is really the following, Ms. Memela. I want to put it to you that as a result of accepting that monetary benefit from JM Aviation, you were improperly influenced to favour them in their dealings with SAT. Do you want to respond to that?
I was improperly in the position to influence them.
Well,
Okay.
what Ms. Hofmeyer is putting to you is that because JM Aviation had made the
bought a land,
payment,
yes.
had made this payment, this had the result that you overlooked things in the performance of your work that you should not have overlooked, and SAT was prejudiced. Ms. Hofmeyer, is that correct?
Indeed.
Yes, that's what
No,
that's
Chair.
what she's putting.
No, Chair, and we'll explain that even better on our
Yeah,
examination.
no, you can
Yes.
explain now.
Sorry?
You can explain now.
No, there is no way where I had influenced the decision to award the contract to AR and JM. And there is no way where I had influenced the decision by any department at SAT to pay AR or JM. So I had said when I was, yesterday when I was talking that it seems that all of a sudden that I'm outside SAT, everybody is now free to point things at Nontsasa because she's no longer there. It goes as far as guys, like, I mean, denying the fact that they attended meeting because they know there's no camera that will prove that they attended meeting. Executive members that are saying, okay, Nontsasa, I asked for the contract from Nontsasa, and Nontsasa said, I don't have a copy, I'm protecting you. And then like there's Mr. Skulk, who has never seen me from a bar of soap.
Right, Mr.
Who's,
Human.
Mr. Human, who has never seen me from a bar of soap, who's comfortable enough to come and sit here, talk about me, because, so you end up like, I mean, not understanding what kind of a role then that I play at SAT. It's as if I was even actually far more senior than the board. If I didn't know better, Chair, I would say maybe unknowing to myself, I was a minister, just hoeing in instructions and stuff. I reported to people. I was an HOD, and I played my role to the best ability. That's why I said earlier on, if I had sat here to answer that, okay, my department, based on the Auditor General, these are the findings, because, like, I mean, you did not ensure that your department ran according to the laws that are guiding the public procurement, I will understand. But where I have to answer on behalf of the acting CEO, like, it means I have that power to influence the acting CEO, to influence the person who owned the GPUs, who had a responsible in terms of the PFMA to protect what he thought was not right to get sold. You know, and you understand that the list goes on. So no, I did not have any influence.
Thank you, Chair. Those are our questions.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We are at 27 minutes past 12. So it doesn't look to me that we have enough time to do anything meaningful in terms of re-examination before we have to adjourn because of my commitments. So it seems to me that what we should do is adjourn, and a date would then be arranged. And I don't want somebody to say, when I said arranged, I meant it must be agreed.
No.
We'll determine the date, and if Ms. Mbandwa has any problem, she will make representations, but we'll determine dates, because we know if you say you'll agree dates with practitioners, you'll never get anywhere.
Indeed,
so,
indeed.
So we will another date will be arranged when Ms. Memela will come back, and then Ms. Mbandwa will get a chance to re-examine. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll have to stop here.
Indeed.
Ms. Mbandwa, you understand?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I accept. It won't be as agreed. It will be as arranged.
Yes.
There is just one request, Chair, we have, if it is possible. I've already raised it with Ms. Hofmeyer.
Yes.
And she did say that that document is not available. But from our talks with Ms. Hofmeyer, she has said that there is an affidavit that is being prepared for Mr. Osini, that is the acting CEO of SAAT. A Chair will remember that his role is pivotal insofar as the pricing of the GPUs is concerned. So what we are then requesting from Ms. Hofmeyer is, if it can come to pass that before we come back here, that affidavit is finalized, because she said it is being compiled, can we then please have sight of it, because it will greatly assist in our re-examination.
Okay, you have raised the issue with her, and
yes, I have.
She hears you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Memela, you understand what I said, that we'll adjourn, and
yes,
then arrangements will be made and you'll come back?
I understand, Chair.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much to everybody. We'll adjourn. On Monday, we will start at 10.
Certainly, Chair.
Yeah. And we continue with the aviation
Indeed.
Witnesses. Yeah. Okay, all right. So we'll adjourn for the day. Tomorrow, we are not going to be sitting, and Friday, but we'll resume on Monday. We adjourn.
All right.